Plants do so much for us. They reduce global warming by storing carbon dioxide in their bodies. They use the sun to create sugars used by almost every living thing on the planet to survive. They stop erosion, absorb air pollution, provide shade, and are homes to millions of organisms. 95% of our food comes from plants, and just over 60% of our food is made from either rice, corn, or wheat. A third of all clothing we wear comes from fibers in the cotton plant. We use wood to build houses, furniture, the paper that books are made of, and the pencils you write with. 70% of all new drugs in the United States are discovered in plants, most of which live in tropical rainforests that are rapidly being cut down. Take a moment to look around you right now and notice how many things are made of plants. One of my favorite medicinal plants is aloe vera. This succulent has leaves filled with a gooey interior. When I was a kid and I would fall on the concrete and scrape my knee, my father would break off a leaf and rub that goo on my cut to help it heal. And it works. Next time you get multiple cuts, try putting aloe on half the wounds and see what a difference it makes. Aloe can also help heal skin burns. Plants are a kingdom of life that includes trees, grasses, flowers, cacti, ferns, mosses, and many more. What do they all have in common? They have eukaryotic cells, just like fungi and animals. They have cell walls, like bacteria and fungi, but it is made out of a polysaccharide that is hard to digest called cellulose. They get their energy from the sun through the process of photosynthesis. To do this, they have organelles in their cells called chloroplasts, and we call plants producers or autotrophs because they don't eat other life forms. Most plants are multicellular, as you can see from the microscopic view of a leaf, which is full of chloroplasts that make the leaves green. Plants use red and blue wavelengths of light to make energy and reflect the green light that they don't use. Lastly, plants have a very special life cycle known as alternation of generations. It gets rather complicated, and it is so different than anything you've heard of before that it requires a lot of explanation. I want to talk more about photosynthesis, and then I'll get back to talking about alternation of generations. Plants do this thing where they turn light energy into chemical energy. The energy is stored in the molecular bonds. Remember that light is not a chemical, and so if a plant wants to make a sugar to store the energy from light, it will need some chemical elements like hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. It gets these from carbon dioxide in the air and water in the soil. The plant doesn't just produce sugars, there is also some leftover parts, oxygen, which the plant gets rid of as a waste product. Fertilizer, which is generally dead stuff or fecal matter, is high in phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium, which the plant needs to make amino acids, which make proteins, which allow the plant to grow. The chemical reaction for photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplasts. Here you can see the chemical formula for photosynthesis, but we're going to break it down into two main phases. The first phase is called the light-dependent reaction. It takes light and converts it into ATP, using proteins embedded in the outer membrane of the chloroplasts. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is a very important form of chemical energy that an organism can use right away. But plants want to store most of the energy they make. So they take this ATP and use it to build glucose out of water and carbon dioxide. This phase of photosynthesis is called the Calvin cycle or light-independent reaction. It is not important for you to know all the chemicals involved, but the two steps mean that plants can make sugars at night from the ATP they gather during the day, which is why fruits and vegetables are best picked in the morning, when they are sweetest. Okay, I said plant life cycles are weird. Let's start with the life cycle of an animal that you're familiar with. Butterflies have a complicated life cycle. Males and females find one another and mate. A sperm cell from the male fertilizes an egg cell within the female to create a fertilized cell called a zygote. The cell divides and develops into a caterpillar. The caterpillar is an eating machine. Once it gets to a certain size, it forms a pupa and metamorphosizes into a butterfly. Let's add some important details to this life cycle. Sperm and egg cells are collectively referred to as gametes. Remember that because it will be important later. All cells in the body of an animal are diploid, outlined in blue, meaning that they carry a pair of each gene. The only exception is the gametes, which only have one set and are called haploid, outlined in red. Sometimes we write diploid as 2n and haploid as n, where n is the number of chromosomes. So when someone says you are half of your mother and half of your father, that is literally true, since half your father's genes go into each sperm cell and half your mother's genes go into her egg cells. Diploid cells are created through a process known as mitosis, whereas haploid cells, like gametes, are made through a process known as meiosis. Both are forms of cell division, and they are similar in many ways, but there are some key differences. Meiosis results in the production of 4 haploid cells, and these cells are not identical. Mitosis just duplicates a cell. I like to remember that mitosis has a T in it and produces 2 cells with 2 of each gene. The only cells in your body that undergo meiosis are your ovaries or testes. The rest of the cells go through mitosis, which is important for growth, repair, and in the case of unicellular organisms, asexual reproduction. The purpose of meiosis is to generate genetic diversity by incorporating some extra steps in the process of cell division, namely crossing over and independent assortment. This is why siblings look similar, but not identical. Remember that humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. One set comes from your father and the other from your mother. You could either use your father's chromosome or your mother's chromosome for each of the 23. The gametes you produce have a random combination of your chromosomes. For example, perhaps chromosome 1, 2, and 4 come from dad, and 3 and 5 come from mom, etc. There are many possibilities, making each gamete different. This is independent assortment. But there's more. Every gamete is not just a random combination of chromosomes. Each chromosome is not 100% from mom or dad. During division, the chromosomes break apart and reform so that all genes are still there, but each chromosome is a combination of pieces from mom and dad. Therefore, each gamete really is a unique combo. This process is called crossing over or recombination. This is a messy process, and mistakes often occur where a gamete ends up with too many genes or not enough genes. Because of this, a high percentage of babies have so many problems in their DNA that they are never born. We refer to these events as miscarriages, spontaneous abortions, or stillbirths, depending on how far along the baby is in development. But most fertilized eggs do not make it to birth. The last step in the process of fertilization, which sperm fertilizes each egg, is also random. So each baby produced by sexual reproduction really is unique. Back to animal life cycles. Which of these arrows represents meiosis? By the way, step 1 is fertilization, not mitosis or meiosis, because it is the coming together of 2 cells instead of cell division. Plant life cycles are strange in many ways. This is the life cycle of a plant known as moss. Just like us, the haploid cell is fertilized by the haploid sperm cell to create a diploid zygote. After that, everything is weird. The zygote develops into a plant capable of producing haploid spores asexually. These spores grow into a different-looking haploid plant that can produce gametes. This is called alternation of generations because the plant has 2 different stages of life, like a caterpillar and a butterfly, but both of those stages can reproduce. Even stranger, the 2 stages are connected to one another. It is like the butterfly grows out of the head of the caterpillar. The life stage that produces the gametes we call the gametophyte, and the life stage that creates the spore we call the sporophyte. Notice that gametes are not the only haploid cells. A plant is haploid for half of its life, whereas animals are haploid for a tiny fraction of their lives. Which of these arrows represents meiosis for the plant life cycle? Yes, plant life cycles are very alien to us. We are almost always diploid, but they have a multicellular haploid stage. It is worth mentioning that fungi and some protists are the opposite of us. They are almost always haploid, and the only stage that is diploid is the zygote. We each just have a different way to go about reproduction. So now you know what defines a plant. But where did plants come from? Remember those cyanobacteria that came up with photosynthesis? They evolved into chloroplasts that were swallowed by protists to become photosynthetic. Do you remember what this process is called? These protists are what we call algae. They are unicellular plants that live in water. Some formed colonies. As the colony size grew and division of labor increased, eventually a multicellular plant evolved. The first land plants evolved about 475 million years ago. We refer to them as non-vascular plants because they don't have vascular tissue used to transport water and nutrients up the plant. Their descendants are still around today. There are over 16,000 species in the taxon Bryophyta. They include mosses and the lesser-known hornworts and liverworts. None grow very tall because they lack vascular tissue. They dominated the Earth for 60 million years. One type of moss that you should know is called sphagnum or peat moss. It was very abundant in wetlands while dinosaurs roamed the earth, and the energy that they stored as glucose has been concentrated over hundreds of millions of years into a solid form known as coal that we burn for electricity. The computer you are using right now runs on energy 300 million years old created by these moss plants. We use sphagnum moss for other things as well. They can hold 16 to 26 times their own weight in water, which makes them useful in gardens as a source of nutrients and water retention. They were also used as primitive menstrual pads and sponges. What makes moss so special? They are the first multicellular group of plants, and although they don't have vascular tissue, they have leaves to obtain energy, a waxy cuticle or covering that prevents water loss, and roots that take up water and nutrients and holds the organism in place. The dominant form is the gametophyte, but next time you see some moss, look closely and perhaps you can find a sporophyte growing out of the top. Fertilization is tricky. How does a leaf that produces sperm cells manage to fertilize eggs on a different leaf? The answer is rain. These plants depend on rain for fertilization. There are a few odd exceptions though. See the outline of a little insect in this photograph? It is called a springtail. They live in mosses and often they end up getting covered in gametes, which means they are good dispersal agents for the mosses. That's teamwork. A final thought. If you visit the Pacific Northwest, you will find many bryophytes. Why are they so common there and rare here in Southern California?